Let's add some nice comments to this. So I'm going to highlight all of this. I'm going to press C, and this one's set ball velocity. And for this one, I'm going to highlight it all and press C, and I'm going to call it reset ball logic. Like so. It's all good. I'm going to compile this, save it. There are two more events that the ball needs. So let's create them. I'm going to select one of these events, and I'm going to move over here, press Ctrl W to duplicate it. And I'm going to rename this one to drive ball. So F2, and I'm going to call it drive ball. I'm going to drag off this, and I'm going to type add actor world offset. And we're basically going to use the velocity to drive the ball, or drive the actor. So I'm going to highlight all of this. I'm going to press C, and I'm going to call this drive ball, drive the ball, using velocity. And lastly, what we're going to do, we're going to create another custom event. So I'm going to click on this, Control W, and I'm going to call this event limit velocity, limit x velocity. So limit x velocity. And what this does, it prevents the ball getting too fast. So when it's over a certain velocity on a given axis, then we will start to gradually slow it down to safe values. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add a branch node. So hold down B, left click, and we're going to connect this to that, like so. Then we're going to get the velocity variable. We're going to get it. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to right click it, and I'm going to split struct pin. And what we want to do, we want to check if the x-axis is greater than a certain float. So float greater than float. If it's greater than 3, you can experiment with this, and you can change it to like 4 or 5 or something. But a 3 is pretty quick. So once it's greater than 3, that I feel that's when it's a bit ridiculous. Well, not ridiculous, but it's pretty hard to keep track of the ball as a human. So let's connect this to that, like that. Then we want to grab this, like so, and we're going to set it. We're going to split this struct pin. We're going to use the default Y and a default Z, but the X, we're actually going to interpolate it down to a given value. So drag off that and type f-interp. And we're going to use the f-interp2 function node. And this will connect to the x velocity, x and the velocity node. The target will be 1, and the delta time will be delta seconds. So we're going to drag off that, and we're going to get world delta seconds, like that. And the interp speed, you can experiment with it, but for me 2 is okay. We're going to connect true to this set velocity node. Just going to drag a box over all of this and press C. We're going to add a nice comment. We're going to call this limit x velocity. Okay, I'm going to compile this. Okay, so let's head back to the player BP. So now on the WinBox overlap event, we're going to drag off the pin from the ball cast node, and we're going to call the event reset ball logic, which is this one right here. So we're going to get that one, and we're going to place this after the delay, and this will go to the player ready. Let's drag a box over all of these nodes, and just reposition it. I'm just going to drag a box over all of them. I'm going to press the C key to add a comment, and I'm going to call this ball overlap events. So we're pretty much done with the player BP. So let's get started on the CPU player. So that's the computer. So I'm going to close out of these, and I'm going to open up the CPU player underscore BP, and we're going to start setting up the logic for that class. I'm just going to get rid of these events here because I don't want to see them yet. And I'm going to start by adding a custom event called getBall because we need to get a reference to the ball. So I'm going to right click and type custom event. We're going to name this event getBall. Now I'm going to get a getBallActors class node, and we're going to, the actor class is going to be the ball underscore BP. Going to get a copy, and our ball variable over here, a reference to our ball is basically going to be the ball that we get from the world. So I'm going to connect that to that like that, and connect this to the execution pin. Next, we're going to create a variable that will represent the computer's choice in how they play the ball. So what is the computer trying to do? Is it trying to hit a low ball? Is it trying to hit a mid ball? Or is it trying to hit a high ball? So we're going to create the logic behind that. And it's rather simple. We're going to start by making an array. So I'm going to right click and type make array. And we're going to use our collision boxes. So we're going to drag in our low box, we're going to drag in our mid box, and we're going to drag in our up box. And I'm just going to drag this onto the node. I'm going to make 2 more points. I'm going to connect these. So 0 is going to be the first element, 1 is the second element, and 2 is the third element. We're going to get a copy, and we're basically just going to randomize it. So we want I'm going to drag off this integer index pin, and I'm going to set this to random integer in range, and we want 0 to 2. Okay. And what we're going to do with this is going to promote this to a variable. So just drag this pin off and promote it to a variable. And we're going to call this CPU choice. Okay, and this will connect to uh, the execution pin from the ball variable. Okay, so that's that. So I'm just going to drag a box over this and press C to add a comment, and I'm going to call this get ball and CPU choice. Next, we need to create the event that will control the logic that sets which side the CPU player is on and also what color they are. So I'm just going to click on the get ball node. I'm going to press Control W to duplicate it, and I'm going to press F2 to rename this node. I'm going to call it setup game settings. Now this is very similar to what we did with the player underscore BP. The only difference is that this is the computer, and it needs to know what the player chose so that it can choose the opposite. So if the player chooses the left side, then the computer is going to be on the right side, and vice versa. If the player chooses red, then the computer is going to be blue. So let's set up the logic that will do that for us. The first thing we need to do is get the player. And since we're going to be doing this more than once in this class, we might as well make a function. So to get the player, we get the player controller. We get the controlled pawn. And from that, we can use it to cast to the player underscore BP. So we're going to cast to player underscore BP. And that's the player right there. Now we're going to create a function from this. So just drag off the as player BP pin and type reroute. And we're going to add a reroute node. Highlight everything except the reroute node, like so. Going to right click, and we're going to collapse it to function. Let's call this function get player. We can now delete the reroute node. And we can see that we also have our get player function in the functions list. So I'm going to connect this up. We need to get the player ready boolean. So get player ready. This is it. Get that. And we need a branch node, so I'm going to hold down B and left click to add a branch node. Connect those up. We also need to get which side the player's on, so we're going to get side index. From here, we're going to do once. And we're going to set the actor's location. So right click, set actor location. We're going to get our sides. As you can see, it's either 187 or negative 187. Just drag that into the graph. Get it. Going to get a copy. I'm going to connect this to new location, and we're going to get the sides from the player. So if the player chooses 0, then what's going to happen is that the sides is going to be the element 0, which is positive. So if the player chooses left, then the computer is going to be on the right. If the player chooses right, then the computer is going to be on the left. So that's how that works. Next, we need to choose which side our collision boxes are going to be on. So let's drag in our collision box sides. Again, we're going to get them. Going to get a copy. And the index is going to be that which the side index is from the player. And from here, we're going to drag in the scene component. And we're going to set relative location. So just connect that up, connect this to that. So next we need to set which side the WinBox is going to be on. So if we get the WinBox sides, and we also get our WinBox, we're going to get a copy. We're going to click on set relative location. I'm going to duplicate that by pressing Ctrl W. Just going to connect these up like that. Connect WinBox to this, and again we're going to use the side index for the WinBox sides, and that's going to go straight into the new location. And lastly, we need to set the computer's color based on what the players chose. So let's add a branch, holding down B and left clicking, and going to connect this up like that. And what we need is the color index. So I'm going to get this, drag off that pin, and I'm going to get color index. As you can see. Now from the color index, I'm going to drag off that pin, and I'm going to type equals equals, because we're going to check if it equals 0. It's going to go into the branch. You can tidy this up a bit. I'm going to double click on this this path right here and drag it down. You can double click on this path right here as well. You can double click, drag it down, and just make it look more presentable. Okay, so if the color index from the player is 0, then the color will be set to blue, and if not, it will be set to red, which is basically the opposite of what the player chose. So if we were to get the cube, we're going to set the parameter, the vector parameter on its materials. So drag off the cube and type set vector parameter value on materials. So I'm going to choose that one. I'm going to press Ctrl W to duplicate it. If it's true and false, make sure this is connected. The parameter name is color. Just going to copy that, paste it onto the second vector parameter node. And if it's equal to 0, then it's going to be blue, like so. And if it's not equal to 0, then it's going to be red, like that. And that's basically all we need to do for this. So I'm going to highlight all of this. I'm going to press C to add a comment. And I'm going to call it set up game settings. Okay. Let's go over the logic that happens when the ball hits the paddle. So for the low box, I'm just going to scroll down, and we want a on-component begin overlap event. So I'm going to click on this. On mid box, we're going to add a on-component begin overlap as well. And also on the up box, I'm going to add a on-component begin overlap and WinBox on-component begin overlap. Let's space these out a little bit. Move it down. Like that. Let's go over the first one. So this is the low box. So the first thing we need is a branch. So I'm going to hold B, left click, and we're going to check if the ball hasn't been hit. So let's drag it in. Going to get ball hit, and we're going to drag off that and type not boolean. And if that's the case, then we'll place this here. Let's go as there. If that's the case, then what we're going to do is we're going to cast to the ball from the other actor. So cast to ball BP. And we're going to get the velocity. So get velocity. Going to negate it. So divided by float. And the value we're going to divide it by is -1. And this is going to go into a add vector. So drag off that pin, add vector. The second pin, B, we're going to right click on it and split struct pin. Very similar to what we did in the player BP. And we're going to get our end speeds. So let's drag that in, get end speeds. And because this is the low box, we're going to negate it. So drag off that, divided by float. Going to divide it by -1. And this is going to go in X. And the velocity for the ball, we're going to set it. So drag off the as ball BP. Now drag off that. We're going to set velocity. Scroll down, and we're going to set the velocity. This is going to go to that, and this is going to go to the velocity, like that. Then what we're going to do is Just move all of this down a bit. What we're going to do, we're going to set the CPU choice again. So I'm just going to go up here and I'm going to borrow the CPU choice nodes. I'm going to highlight this and hold Control, highlight this one, and I'm going to press Control copy, so Control C to copy it. I'm going to come back down and I'm going to paste those nodes here. Now this is going to go to this, like that. And after this, the ball hit will be set to true. And then we're going to have a delay node. We're going to have a delay of 1 second. You can experiment with that and see how long you would like to have it. But 1 second is good. And then after that, we're going to set ball hit to false. Just like that. And that's it for the low box logic. Now we're going to go over the mid box logic. So again, we're going to check that the ball hasn't been hit yet. So we're just going to copy this. I'm actually going to copy all of this and I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to connect this up to the mid box. And over actor will go to the object on the ball node. We want to negate it, which is correct, but we're not going to do any addition to the up and down the y-axis. Sorry, the x-axis. So I'm going to delete all of that stuff, and from the velocity, we're going to actually just going to get rid of that. We're going to break this vector. And we're going to multiply this by a small amount to make it a bit faster than what it is. So multiply by float. So float times float. We're going to multiply it by 1.004. And because it's hitting it back, we need to negate it. So we divide it by a float. I'm going to divide this by -1. And from here, we're going to make a vector. So in velocity, strike that off, and we're going to make a vector. The x is going to go to x. This is going to go into the y, and this is going to go into the z. Okay. Now with the up box, it's going to be the exact same as what happens with the low box, but the opposite. So we're not going to be negating that. So what we're going to do, we're just going to grab all of this again, and I'm going to come down here. I'm going to press Control W to duplicate it. I'm just going to connect this up like so. Over actor is going to go into this, and here we're not going to invert this. So we want to send it upwards because this is the up box. So get rid of this divide by -1, and that's going to go into the the X. Okay, so that's the up box done. So all of these are gonna go into this end bit here where the CPU choices and when the ball gets hit and all of that. So this is going to go into that one as well, and this one's going to go into this one. So now we've got to do the WinBox logic for the for when the player scores a point against the computer. So the first thing we need is a cast to the ball node. So I'm just going to grab this one here. Going to press Control W, and we're going to just connect this up. Connect the other actor to the object. I'm also going to borrow this get player node. Just going to drag it into the graph. And that's our get player function that we created from before. So all this is it casts, get the player controller, get the control pawn, and then we cast to the player BP. I'm just going to connect that up. And from this, we're going to set the player score, because this is when the ball gets hit into the computer's win box, which means that the player needs to score a point. So I'm going to grab off this and I'm going to set the player score. So set player score. There it is. That's the variable we made. Grab that. And we're going to add 1 to it. So drag off the current value. I'm going to add the integer to integer. So we're going to add 1. And we're going to set that to be the input value for when we set this variable. And just connect that up. And after we do that, the player will not be ready anymore. So the whole game will cease. So we're going to set player ready to false, like that. And we're going to have a delay of about 3 seconds. So delay 3 seconds. And let's copy this again. Just duplicate that. So selected it and press Control W to duplicate it. Put that over here. And this is going to go into that player ready. And so there'll be a 3-second wait, and then the player is ready again. And then from the ball, we're going to call the reset ball logic event. So drag off that, type reset ball logic, place that here. And that's basically our logic for the WinBox. So I'm just going to drag a box over all of this, and I'm going to add a comment. So press C. I'm going to call this overlap events. It's a basic comment. So what we need to do now is set up the logic for the computer to align itself with the ball and make sure it tries to hit it or tries to deflect it. So let's go over that logic. I'm going to grab a one of these custom event nodes. Come down here to some clean space. I'm going to press Control W to duplicate that. And we're going to call this event move up. So move up. We're going to have another event called move down, so I'm just going to duplicate that. I'm going to rename it. It's going to press F2 and I'm going to call this move down. So let's go over the logic for moving up first. We're going to get the getPlayer function. Let's connect this up. I'm going to check if the player is ready. So getPlayer ready. I'm going to add a branch by holding down B, left clicking. Connect it up. And then from this, we're going to check if the ball is valid. So we're going to get the ball, drag off the pin and type is valid. Now you can use either of these. I'm going to use this one. If that's true, then we're going to check if the CPU choice is valid. So I'm going to go into components here. We can see that we have our CPU choice component. So I'm going to drag that in. Get CPU choice. We're going to check if that's valid. So I'm going to drag up that pin and is valid. Now, if that's valid, then what we're going to do, we're going to get the world location of the CPU choice. So drag off the CPU choice, get world location. And what I'm going to do is split struct pin. So you can see this vector output here. I'm going to right click on it and split struct pin. And we're going to get its X axis. So that's up and down. If it's less than a certain amount, then we will attempt to kind of align ourselves with it. So drag off the X axis from the location from CPU choice. I'm going to say less than float. So float less than float. Enter. If it's less than 116, add a branch node. Hold B, left click. If it's less than 116, then what we're going to do, because 116 is basically like the top of the screen, we have to make sure it's less than that. If that's the case, then we have to do another condition, so whereby we get the ball. We get the ball's location, so I'm going to click on this and duplicate this like that. Sorry, we don't want to get we don't want to get world location. We want to get the actor location, because world location is for components, which are like these things. We want to get the actor location, so get actor location, and from this I'm going to right click and split the struct pin, and we're going to get the ball's x-axis. If it's greater than a certain amount, so if the ball's x-axis is greater than the CPU choice x-axis, just going to hold down B, left click to add another condition. If that's the case, then what we're going to do, we're going to get the cube, which is this thing here, this component, drag it in, and we're going to add world offset. So drag off that, add world offset. Set that up. Now this input vector parameter, I'm going to right click on it and split struct pin. And we're going to basically move up on the x-axis at a rate that the CPU speed is. So let's drag in the CPU speed, and we're gonna plug this into the delta x, delta location x. So moving down will require the same sort of logic. We still want to do validation checks to check if the player is ready, to check if the ball is valid, and to check if the CPU choice is valid. So I'm just going to copy those nodes. I'm going to highlight all of these. So I've highlighted the player, get player, player ready, and all these like so. And I'm going to press Control W to duplicate it. So this is just checking if all of these components exist and if the player is ready. Now, if that's the case, we will again we need to get the I'm actually going to duplicate these. I'm going to grab these two, put it down here. So CPU choice will go into world location, and we need to get the ball, and ball will go into the get actor location. And the condition we're going to do here is different from this one. So what we're going to do, we're going to check if the x is greater than negative 116, which is basically the bottom, the lowest it's allowed to go. So if CPU choice is greater, if CPU's choice is x-axis in the world is greater than float, if it's greater than 116, negative 116. Can add a branch node for that, hold B, left click, connect these up. It's greater than the lowest it's allowed to go, and if it's less, if the ball's x-axis, so the ball's x-axis, if the ball's x-axis is less than float, if it's less than the CPU choice x-axis, I'm going to add another branch node. I'm going to connect this up like that, and this to that. If that's the case, then what we're going to do is the same thing we do here, but just the opposite. So I'm just going to grab all of this, where we offset the cube upwards, but here we're going to offset it down. So connect that to that, and the CPU speed, we're actually going to divide it by a float to invert it or negate it. So -1, and that's going to go into x like that. So that's the logic for moving down. So let's drag a nice box over all of those nodes. I'm going to press C to add a nice comment. We're going to call this movement logic, I guess. Just going to resize it. Let's make sure that these events are being called when they should. So I'm just going to go up the top here, and I'm going to right click and add a event begin play. And I'm also going to add a event tick. So event play is going to call the get ball event. So I'm just going to drag off event begin play and type get ball. So if we double click that, that should send us straight to the get ball event, which carries out all this logic here. Now, the event tick will call the move up event. It would also call the move down event. And it will also call the setup game settings event. I'm going to drag a box over all of these. I'm going to press C. And I'm going to call this events. I'm going to color it red. And I'm going to color the bubble as well. That's just my personal preference in commenting Blueprint. It just looks nicer.